Good afternoon. My name's Tom and I'm the Managing Director of Total Media now, which gives you a hint as to what I do now. What I've been asked to talk to you about is how we transformed Total Media, which was a traditional media agency with a proud and good 30-year history, into a media agency that might better solve some of our clients' problems over the next 30 years. My background is more in anthropology. It's what I studied, it's what I practiced, and so I pulled a natural bias towards understanding people and culture, aligned with an increasing interest in behavioral psychology and neuroscience. It sort of formed the foundation of the answer that me and my fellow directors gave to our shareholders about what sort of agency we wanted to be and why, and where we thought there was an opportunity. So 2 years ago, we began the process of trying to really sort of boldly create a new breed of agency, one that set about answering, to our minds, a higher order of problem, not just focusing on programmatic distribution systems, not focusing on trying to make sense out of an ever-increasing amount of sophisticated and scaled data and transferring that into actionable insight, not trying to help blur the worlds of media and creative, but really to focus on a problem that was universal. So we spent a lot of money, which you have to do. My shareholders were great about that. And we brought in skills. We brought in anthropology skills with ethnographic fieldwork techniques and tools. We brought in behavioral psychologists. We brought in neuroscientists. And we brought them into our business and embedded them. So sort of stage one was bringing in the right talent. And then we set about asking, and it was to the point that the gentleman talked about at Deloitte's, interesting questions. And when you start interesting questions and you start challenging your clients, not on a programmatic delivery system, not on a marketing problem, not on a creative problem, but start challenging them on the way that people actually behave, the way that people actually think, you start to realize how often irrelevant marketing is, how irrelevant creative is, how irrelevant media is, how irrelevant social media is, or scale data analytics is in actually getting people to do things. The majority of us aren't predominantly governed by marketing. We're governed by a wide variety of things, and yes, marketing can influence that, but understanding its relative space in the way that we behave is really important to answering those. So what I thought I would do is not so much share with you how we go about doing what we do, but the sorts of questions that we ask and see if that's really of interest. So sorts of questions that get us thinking. So multitasking, it's one of the common myths that we're all good at multitasking or not, or that it's gender specific or it's age specific. We're actually incapable of multitasking. It doesn't matter whether you're male, female, young or old, you can only perform one cognitive function at a time. There are rare occasions before you start Googling it about going, bollocks, I can multitask, where actually people can. So snipers are very good multitaskers because they perform a repetitive physical function over and over and over again, and then their mind can drift and think about their dinner while they've got somewhere in their sights or something else. But they're very good multitaskers. But generally, you can't multitask. And where this becomes massively important to a media agency is that you're going in a world of dual screening or tri-screening or huge competition for our attention. Multitasking or trying to multitask comes at a significant cognitive cost. What you're actually doing is flicking between 2 or 3 or 4 things at once, creating a lot of strain, which means that attention, which means that focus, which means that creativity needs to work a lot harder if you want to cut through in a modern world. So that's the problem to solve. Not we need to be on 3 devices, we need to be on 6 devices, we need to follow you. It's how do you get attention in a world with a significant cognitive cost due to the invasion of technology into everything that we do. And then look at other things like social media. This is somewhat provocative, but there was a brilliant study by a group called Pen Courage, which is a section of anonymized blogs that link to your Facebook profile, about 70,000. And what they found is that 66% of all social posts were lies. And the most common lies were the success of your marriage, the success of your holiday, the success of your career, and actually being out versus being in. So we lie a lot. And the youth lie even more than most, so shock. But the shocking factor was actually it started to have an impact on their psychographic or their autobiographical memory. So, put simply, they started to believe their own lies. So you say, I went out last night, it was super awesome. You know, did you really? Yeah, oh shit, no. I don't need to lie to you. I didn't actually go out. But they really genuinely believe their own lies, and they do it with such a huge amount of pace. So this is really interesting, it's great for the dinner table, but it also matters hugely to us because when we're talking to our clients about following data signals that you see when you see them in any interface or technology interface with Facebook or anyone else, and you start realizing that a lot of those signals might actually be lies, that they might not have a thunderously good career, so they don't want to see an advert about how to excel even more, or they might not actually go out a huge amount in the evening, so what point serving them an ad about going to a gig or a venue or drink? Actually, it's a load of bollocks. So it's really important to overlay an understanding of human behavior and that we're notorious liars and we're having to sort of curate more and more furiously our lives to the world and present them as interesting. And so that has a behavioral impact on the way that on what we do. So think about that, and obviously it will have an impact on your creative and everything else. So whistling on, confirmation bias. Depending on your political preferences over the last year and a half, you'll either be delighted or disgusted about the way the world is turning. And a lot of that has to do with confirmation bias, because no matter what actually is visible, no matter what is seen, no matter what information is passed out to you, we all search out for information that confirms or reinforces our own preferences. It's the thing that drives you to put into Google why Jeremy Corbyn is so brilliant or so full of bollocks or whatever it is that you think. It's that final word, it's that final addendum to that search that pushes you either to The Guardian or The Telegraph, to New York Post or The Wall Street Journal. It's that final confirmation that actually pushes you and drives you. Now that in itself is challenging, because actually when everyone talks in creative or media, and we do it with our clients as well, saying we're going to get people to change their opinion and change the perception of your brand or get them to like you or care about you more, their actual starting position is really important. And what's making it more difficult, and I'm aware that some of you guys were talking about this yesterday, is the filter bubble, the sort of algorithmic process of driving us towards a specific conclusion, irrespective of what it is that we thought that we were searching. So on Amazon, other people, you bought this, other people bought this. On Facebook, everyone that you know likes this. In Google, we think you were searching for that. So this filter bubble, relentlessly pushing you towards specifically algorithmically predetermined solutions or suggestions, combined with your own confirmation bias, is creating both a physical and virtual filter bubble that's incredibly hard to penetrate. So presenting the new, presenting the alternative, presenting new possibilities is increasingly difficult. And if you look to neuroscience and people like Dr. Bo Lotto, who's a brilliant neuroscientist who we've been working with over the last year, they will argue that any form of genuine change in perception starts by trying to widen the scope of possibilities. Just that, nothing else, not tell them that they have to fall in love with you, engage with you, or tell everyone about you, but just consider you. And in a world where actually we're considering less and less variety, it's really challenging. If you don't believe me, you can believe the stats. About 50% of all minutes online in the UK are spent with 5 properties. 5. So for all the choice in the UK, 50% of all of your time spent online is spent with these 5, and they have furious self-interest that push you to one conclusion or another. So a real challenge. So we talk to our clients about that. We talk to them about we talked about how sort of lying earlier, but we also talked to them about negativity. So we get a lot of briefs as well, where clients will say to us, have a TV campaign running, and one of the objectives is we want people to be super engaged. We want them to tweet afterwards about how much they like it, we want them to share it, we want them to get really excited. And then we talked to them about some research that was done by Goldsmith University, where they analysed 235 million tweets and found that the vast bulk of tweets from a mobile were negative by comparison to other platforms, which is really exciting. It's really interesting insight. And what it does, what it's reflecting, is our negativity bias. That generally we're more negative than positive. And what the emotional nature of that negativity reflects is the proximity of the device. So put those two together, it's why you get a teaching assistant out of Swansea saying that they hope someone dies of cancer if someone knocks them out of Mary Bear or the Great British Bake Off. Why you get so angry about such small things. Proximity, negativity bias combined together create this really odd emotional reaction where we spill and vent rage more frequently than we do positivity. So an objective which sets to you, I want people to respond really happily from their mobile to my ad, is actually really challenging. It's brilliant if you can do it, but the question you have to ask is why? Why would they do that when normally their normal behavior is not to do so? So it's a good starting point. We also get asked a huge amount about changing brand perception. So clients come to us and say, I want them to consider us as this. I want to challenge perception of how my brand's considered. So what we've done is we've tried to help our clients to codify, not perception, because there's so much to it, but codify the ways in which any perception of anything is formed. And these fall into 6 broad categories, and this is sort of reflective of the work of people like Alan Sachs, Gary Johns, Dr. David Eagleman, Bo Lotto, some really brilliant minds in the field. And they talk about these 6 areas. So how important emotion is, your sort of depending on which your stance is and how you can codify emotion, this is sort of 8 primary psychoevolutionary theory of 8 primary emotions. Then there's motivation, which is the goal-seeking behavior, experience, situation, so where you are, the amount of information you have on a product, and socio-cultural variables such as social norms. Now, there's a lot to take in there, but effectively, a combination of those forces drive your perception of anything and everything. So positive perception, the stars align across those 6 variables. Really negative perception, one of those things is dominant and it's really bad. Put into the real world, we were working with Droga 5 recently on trying to reinvigorate a microwavable burger brand, which is quite difficult because generally the people who eat microwavable burgers, and you can believe me or not, eat them in vast quantities. they surprisingly vast quantities, and they love them. But when I ask you or suggest to you that maybe tonight go home and have a microwavable burger, you think, it's going to be disgusting, it's awful, I'm not going to do it. My perception of that is really, really poor. And when you think about what is your perception formed from, it will be a combination of these different things. It will be disgust will come up. So your instant emotional reaction is that, microwavable meat, no thank you. Motivation. Think about what is your incentive or impulse or inspiration to go and do that. You say, well, tonight I have a huge kitchen, a pantry full of wonderful ingredients, and I live in London or New York, so I've got quinoa and I've got kale and I've got all these things. I don't want a microwavable burger. My experience of microwave food has been terrible. My situation is that, as I said, is in London or somewhere where I've got lots of choices. My information on this is limited, so I'll fill the informational gap with my own narrative. And socio-cultural norms suggest to me that I really shouldn't be eating microwavable meat, and it's suggestive of a lower social class. However, if I transport you to a different context where it's 11 o'clock at night, you've been out, you've probably had one or too many, slightly emotional, fragile, but probably experiencing more joy than anything else. You see a forecourt garage, you see a Rustler's, you're hungry, your motivation is, I need to eat, but there's nothing else here because my situation is different. A Rustler's looks pretty good, and your perception of a Rustler's at that point is like, fuck yeah, that's great, a Rustler's is awesome, put the burger sauce on, job done. Your perception changes massively depending on these variables, and this is the sort of conversation that we like to have with our clients. What are you going to do across any of these 6 things that is going to genuinely change their behavior? Because I don't want to hear about necessarily a product innovation, how exciting that is, or a packaging innovation, I'm sure that's also very exciting, or the distribution of ads, which we should be excited about as a media agency, and their flighting and relative ratios of brand versus response advertising. You have to have a higher order way of addressing this perception change. And then briefly, there are 3 large barriers if you're looking to change perception as well. They sort of present themselves as selective attention, distortion, and retention. And this is basically back to confirmation bias, that we construct a world around us that suits our own ideology and our own views. And it's really important that you think about how you're going to address these particular barriers. So take, for example, selective attention, and whether you're a fan of a particular sports team or not. Now, I'm a rugby fan, and my personal club is Harlequins. You can show me a teeny fractional ad of Harlequins in any format, any media, and I laser in on it. You can show me 20 double-page spreads or interstitials or huge banners of a rival, and I just won't pay the fucking blindest bit of attention to it. I'll ignore it, I'll sail through, because I don't want to. And similarly with selective distortion, you'll start to twist and manipulate and turn the information that you see in front of you to suit your own preferences as well. And again, with retention, quite simply, you just don't remember things as well if you have a perception that's poor. So all these things need to be overcome. They all need to be challenged. And as I said earlier, one way of addressing them, to give away some of the secrets from all those great in the goods, is that you need to widen the tent of possibilities, is what Bo Lotto calls it, who's a brilliant neuroscientist. He's done great TED Talks, so I advise you to have a look at those as well. But basically just get people to consider that A might be wrong, not that B is right. Just get them to think more broadly, get them to think differently is how you challenge these. And it's helped us to win a lot of really exciting and innovative clients and to charge differently. I'm proud to say that about 40% of our revenue is now derived from fees, which many of you probably don't think is particularly impressive. But for us as a media agency, it was hugely important to get clients to pay for this thinking, not just to get them to go, that's really interesting, I really want to talk about it when I go home and tell my wife about the stat that I saw some guy present, but actually to pay for it and to understand it. So it's been huge evolution, but we are nowhere near done yet. The fact that probably most of you don't know who I am or what we do probably is indicative that our fame is lagging. So we've got a job to do. But very, very quickly, I was asked to sort of tell you, because I'm 14 seconds over already, what we did to help start us on our journey. The first thing that we did is that we identified that we had to place a bet somewhere. We couldn't be a ubiquitous provider of services across all different areas. There were just far too many, and you couldn't be brilliant at everything. So we said, what are we going to do? And luckily, even though I myself as well, I'm an introvert, I was able to be quite belligerent about the importance of behavioral science and anthropology, and we got that going, and that became our focus. And then we put a large bet behind it, which is the other unavoidable truth, is that all of this took a lot of investment. It took a lot of money, and it took a huge amount of courage from our two lead shareholders who, having to transform a company with a bunch of under 40-year-olds who think they know everything about everything and giving them lots of money was an incredibly brave thing for them to do, and they deserve a huge amount of respect, but they just had to put a bet somewhere, and they did it. Recognize that you're not going to be for everyone was really important, because a lot of our clients really didn't like it, so we said, you know, there were a few Supermans who just flew off, who didn't want to pay more for a highly evolved service where we understand people's culture and profiles and behavior. They're like, I don't fucking care, and I want it to be cheaper because procurement has told me that it's got to be cheaper. And we said, oh, but it's brilliant, we're fabulously more expensive, but more valuable. And they went, fuck off, and they flew off. So, but luckily, we have enough men and women who do want to work with us, and we're able to show and evidence the success of actually answering a higher order problem, because I've got no case studies in here which I'll bore you with, but genuinely, when you get it right, and we don't always get it right at all, but when we do get it right and we start to solve those problems, we do help to genuinely deliver inflection points rather than just little incremental changes. So when it works big. Two more things. We had to have short and long-term goals. I asked them for a lot of money. Me and my directors asked them for a lot of money. Look at the ego. There were about 9 of us who helped bring this project to life and who worked very hard on it. But we knew success wasn't going to be immediate, and for us, the amount of money that we asked for was a lot. What we did is we created proxies, so short-term measures for us that would show us that we were on the right path, not just income-based, not just revenue-based, but are we getting on the right pitches? Are we having the right conversations? Are we getting to speak to board directors instead of marketing directors? What are we doing to demonstrate that our higher level thinking is taking us further? And each of those gave us confident signals that it was the right investment to make. So that was really important in terms of reassuring both my chairman and CEO that we were on the right path. And then lastly, this was really important. We had to defend our positioning, particularly our soft spots, particularly our weak spots, because we all have them. You all have those moments where you say, look, I'm a really smart media planning, behavioral planning agency. We do things differently and better and more evolved, and it's expensive. And your client goes, how about I don't pay more, but I don't leave? And you go, fuck. Okay. Or someone comes to you and says, how about you do this pitch? It's got absolutely nothing to do with understanding our audience or our customers or people better. I just want you to put forward the lowest possible price. And I know that agency Y will do it for this. Will you do the same? And those are realistic moments that come to you all through an evolution of a program like this, where you have to say no. Put bluntly, you just have to say no, because we didn't always. My particular weakness is new business, where tend to go for everything that gets thrown at me. So our business development director, Pedro, who's sitting in the room, generally has to sort of smack me away from it. But I'm a slut for business development. So I'll tend to try and go for things, which isn't great for reinforcing a position of like this. So you really do have to protect your privates and make sure that you don't go for everything and hold true to what you believe, because if you do, you produce great work and you can evidence it consistently rather than just being a jack of all trades. That was it. Thank you, and I'm a bit over, so thank you.